Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank everyone for turning out on this day when it's really busy at the show for the tape seminar. Well, I've actually lost track of how many we've done at AXPONA so far. I think there are 6 we've done so far, and each year the turnout keeps getting better and better. So I want to thank everyone for coming. And quick question, so how many people's first time at the tape seminar at AXPONA? Wow, so we have a lot of newbies. That's great. So how many people are looking just to get into tape, kind of curious? Show of hands. Okay, and how many people are real deep into tape? Excellent. Okay, so we got like a great, 50-50 distribution. So hopefully, between everybody that's here on the panel with Chad, Dan, Chris, and myself, we're trying to keep it down to like 3 people this year so that we can extend the question and answer sessions a little bit longer than we've done in the past. So again, make sure to save your questions up, and everybody here should be able to answer any questions you might have. So we're going to start with just a little bit of background, and quickly go through and save time for everybody else. But I started in tape about 10 years ago, writing about it for Positive Feedback, and at that time, I was kind of laughed at, and that didn't really bother me very much because I knew what sounded the best. And, I stuck to it over the years, and it's been like really gratifying to see an area, it's always going to be a niche area, but a big niche area. And, after all, it's about, audiophiles are about getting the best sound and music out of their systems. And when everything comes to fruition, there's nothing better than tape. So it's really, we've been seeing the amount of software grow. We're seeing new machines coming out. We're seeing old machines being refurbished. I walked around the show yesterday, and it was like, whoa, where did all these tape machines come from? I mean, I think I counted at least 12 tape machines at the show, and I haven't even been around to the rooms very much. So, there's no way that you can miss getting to hear tape at this year's show. And again, we have a really great panel this year, headed up by Chris Mara, who owns Welcome to 1979 Studios down in Nashville, and he's a real dedicated analog person who does recording, he does mastering, he does plating, so he does the whole 9 yards. He also runs courses for people who are interested in getting into analog recording. So anyone who's thinks they might like to do home recording, we want to open a studio, Chris has a little tutorial that people can go to. Then we have Dan, who's at Atr Services, and all those great ATR Ampex decks that are out there. Dan is the man. I think Dan is the guy who's doing all of Chad's decks and getting them up to snuff for all of his tapes. And finally, we have Chad, who for years we've tried to push into, getting into tape. And last year at AXPONA, he came out with his first tapes, and he had just released number 5 and 6 here at the show, Scheherazade and the Pines of Rome. And those are kind of like the holy grail of classical music out there, and there are people just chomping at the bit to really hear these recordings that have been long cherished by audiophiles in the best format possible. So that's really awesome. And he's got 2 more of the RCA Living Stereos, and he's got 2 that I'm looking for, the Wilson recordings. And if you haven't heard Chad's LPs, you should really grab Center Stage and Winds of War and Peace while you're at the show, because they are so much better than the original recording that were released back in probably the 90s by Dave Wilson. They're phenomenal recordings. So you can get a little taste of what the tapes are going to sound like. And this was the kind of thing I found out a couple years ago at CES in Vegas. I thought, it would just kind of kick off this seminar with some real fun. And this is a quote taken from Dan's mentor, and nothing sounds like tape. And, once you hear tape, there's no going back. I had people come over to my home and listen to tape, and they walk out, where do I get a machine? So, one of those things, if you can't afford it, don't ask what the price is. And, it's nothing new. I mean, tape has been an audiophile standard for years. A couple covers from the Stereophile magazine showing Gordon Holt from Stereophile, who reviewed tape decks, did his own recordings, and the review from the Absolute Sound back in the early days from Harry Pearson of reel-to-reel tape machines. So, they were a part of our staple at one time before digital sort of came into the picture. And, I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but for those that are interested in getting into it, what do you need to know? Well, basically, you want to have a machine that's gentle on the tape handling, and you need to know that the machine can handle IEC and NAB equalization. Other than that, you know, most of the other stuff that scared people off when I started, as far as, oh, where are we going to get parts? Parts are pretty easily available nowadays. So that shouldn't be something that's holding you back. So, you know, whether you want to start with a turnkey like Greg Barron's, which comes, or like Chris's machine that's on display here at the show, which comes with a warranty. It's like new, it's beautiful. All you do is you plug it in and play, and, you know, you're off to the races. You know, other people might want to start with like a Techniques or an Atari or the J-Quarter machines, and then you can add outboard electronics. And those who have the space, and, you know, that's sort of, you know, they do take up more space. There's the pro machines that you can get, like the Studers and the Ampexes. And the other thing I just wanted to point out before I get into the software is one thing that when you're buying tape that no one really talks about, because there's a lot of garbage out there, especially on eBay, is tape provenance. You know, what's the origin of the source of the tape? What's the history of it? You know, when Chad gets a tape, you know that what you have in your hand came from the real master. There's garbage out there that people like took CDs and put on tape and tried to pass it off as tape. So again, that's the first question you'd ask. You know, when you get something from the Tape Project, something from Chad, something from Yarlung, you know that provenance is you're listening to the original tape. And again, each year, we started out 10 years ago with one company, the Tape Project. And the list keeps growing every year, and I can tell you right now that I know of like at least another 2 or 3 companies that either by the end of the year or the beginning of next year are going to start offering music on 15-inch reel-to-reel tape. But I just kind of put asterisks next to the companies that I really felt that, or really feel, are setting the standard. You got the Tape Project, that were really people that started the whole thing rolling, Acoustic Sounds, Yarlung, if you love classical music, they're doing the best new recordings on tape. And you can also, if you don't want to buy a tape machine, they also sell it on LPs, and you can get also in high resolution quad DSD. So, you know, you can buy whatever format for the Yarlungs. International Phonograph, Jonathan's a hometown man from Chicago. You'll hear a lot of his tapes around at the show. So, and then the other is Groove Note, which was Ying Tan's label. He's offering some tapes. And just sort of like, well, where do I get tapes? Well, first of all, there's a little link there to my bulletin board where we do a lot on tape, a lot on analog, just a lot on high-end audio. And, you know, if you want to look at what are the tapes to get, I've kind of put together a list of all the tapes that I've heard, and I try to get all of them, and I can recommend. And this is just a list of what I've heard that I really would put in my baker's dozen of tapes. And you can see there's an assortment of some great old recordings like Waltz for Debbie. There's some new recordings. The D. Alexander on International Phonograph from Jonathan Horowitz is to die for. That lady can sing. She's not like your ordinary female audiophile singer. She is really the real deal. Opus 3, some of the best tapes out there. I think the Yellow, if you like rock and roll, from Horch House is really good. So anyway, and the Umasakela that Chad came out with, phenomenal. It will just blow your socks off. I mean, you know, the LP is good, but there's just stuff like in the low end and the dynamics that the tape just, you know, has it hands and shoulders above the LP. So without any further ado, we're going to start a little bit with the technical end, a little bit about the machines, and then we're going to finish up with the actual software part that Chad's going to cover. And he's going to have a little special treat for everybody. I think everybody will really enjoy about, you know, the Acoustic Sounds tape. So I think we say we're going to start with Chris. So first I'll introduce Chris Mara from Welcome to 1979 Studios.
Sorry about that. Cool. Well, thank you, Miles. And thanks for having me. I'm going to talk a little bit about tape being the ultimate format. I'm sure if you're dabbling and trying to figure out why to get into tape, you're probably thinking, why do I need another format? But first, I'll talk a little bit about myself and my background so you know I'm just not here trying to sell tape machines. I own a studio in Nashville. I've been a recording engineer there for 20 years. And in my facility, we also do vinyl mastering at a high level. And we do the next step in record production called electroplating. It's the first new equipment made for electroplating in like 40 years. So basically, in my building, I buy tape from Dan's company, and I hire companies like Chad's record pressing plant to press records, and everything in between I do. So basically, I love records and I love vinyls a lot. But there are some physical attributes to vinyl records that are problematic. So I'm not going to talk to you about the experience of vinyl versus tape. Those things are nebulous and hold different values to different people. I'm going to talk to you about some actual facts and science about the limitations of vinyl and some things about tape and why tape is a better format if you're into fidelity. Okay. The first is what's called intertrack distortion. What this simply means is a song on the inside of the record won't sound as good as if that same song is placed on the outside of the record for reasons that I can explain, but it would take a little while. Okay, this is a very common thing. Everyone knows about it. So that's a real thing, and it's problematic in making a great sounding record. The next thing is this is a photo taken from the microscope of my lathe of actual record grooves. Musical content can affect the overall volume of a record. So you see the grooves on the left, they're bigger, they're deeper than the ones on the right. Well, they take up more room on a record. So if you have a very dynamic and loud record, or loud music, it affects the overall volume of a record. And this is a concern because of noise floor and all that kind of thing, right? And how the record is presented to the listener, to the end user, affects volume as well. This is a double LP. There's 3 songs on this side of the record. This is a loud record. This is a standard LP with 6 songs on the side. It's not as loud, okay? So these are all things that happen too. Tape is not affected by any of these. At 15 inches per second, you have about 33 minutes of music, no matter how loud it is, no matter how in phase or out of phase it is. So that's a very important thing to be able to buy something and know that no matter how much is on there, the quality is still going to be extremely high if it's a good source tape. And this is my biggest gripe about vinyl records, and it's actually not the vinyl record's fault. It's not the format. It's more about record labels and that kind of thing. This is about the quality of the original pressing versus a reorder of that pressing versus a reissue. So I personally have gone to a record store to buy a major label record that I cut because I loved it, and I get home and I pull it out of the sleeve and it's not the one I cut because the record got some press or won a Grammy, and then they had to press a bunch of them, so they farm it out overseas and somebody cuts it, and I can't really use the language I want to use to describe how I feel. But it sucks. So the point is, a consumer goes to a store to buy a record and they don't know what they're getting. It could be a double LP, single LP, whatever. And as Miles pointed out earlier, if you're buying tapes from Chad or the Tape Project, you know what you're getting each time. And that's not as simple in the vinyl industry, okay? So digital audio, I'm not gonna waste my time. So let's talk about some problems that tape machines have, okay? So my company, Mara Machine, if you say our slogan fast, it says, we're old school. Anyway, tape machines are big, and you have to dedicate space in your home. This is our studio version. I've been restoring tape machines for about 10 years, mainly to the recording studio world, and we understood that space is a high commodity in the home market. So we repackaged it in a smaller unit. Again, they're not as simple to use as a turntable. There's a lot of buttons and switches there. But that's not saying it's hard. So this is a control panel for a tape machine. Who here has never used a tape machine? Raise your hand. All right, sir. How do you think I would get this machine to go into play mode? Boom. Exactly right. Now, how would I get it to stop doing that? Stop button. Exactly. So it's not that hard. We've already learned how to use it right now. Threading a tape is a little bit hard. It may seem. Oops. Well, that was a video of me threading a tape machine. It's easy. So basically, to sum everything up, along with all those things, tape the longevity of a tape itself, it won't get scratched or become warped. And tape heads do not wear nearly as fast as a styli. A tape head is basically a lifetime purchase. And your music, having said all that, your music will sound like your music longer. It won't get damaged and degrade with tape. So that's my take on tape machines. Now it's your turn. Or your take on whatever you want to talk about.
Okay. My name is Dan Labrie. I work for Atr Services and Atr Magnetics. We're located in York, Pennsylvania. Yeah, so give you a brief rundown of the two companies I work for. The excellent brain that I learned all this from, and who founded both these companies. And then I'll talk about a couple things that, you know, when I was learning tape machines, I wish there were videos and explanations, like I hope to provide, that will kind of like answer those. So when your knowledge is in between, like I have a little bit or I know everything, hopefully this is somewhere in between to sort of bridge that gap. Okay, so Atr Services was founded by Mike Spitz, sort of the mentor, professional sort of instructor that I had, you know, learning these machines. And we specialize in the repair and restoration of the Ampex ATR 100 series machine. These machines are used from, I don't know, recording studio to the archival, and we're preparing quite a large percentage of our sales now are going for home audiophile use, home playback, home recording. That's one side. And then in 2006, Mike went on to further address the needs of the analog recording world by starting America's only coding facility for professional magnetic tape. So we produced two formulas as of 2 years ago. ATR Master Tape, which is the studio grade tape, coming in 2-inch and 1/4 inch. And then just recently the MDS 36 long playing tape in 1/4 inch. Okay, so yeah, this is where you fall asleep. So I'm going to talk about azimuth and setting bias. I get these questions, I want to say on an hourly basis. It feels like it's so often. So the first thing I'm going to say is that there's no one way, you know, to skin a cat or whatever. But I'll give you 4, or maybe 3 of 4, because I didn't have time to make the 4th one up. But the first thing that I'm just going to say, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but if I hear one more person butcher Lysigou, I'm going to quit the business. So there's the phonetic, and yes, it's the sort of XY display on your oscilloscope. But don't worry, if you don't have an oscilloscope, or if your scope doesn't do XY, you can still use the scope to set your azimuth correctly. Yeah. Huh? So, oh, okay, yeah. For those who don't know, short version. So, in order to get the the most high frequency output and to establish the phase relationship between left and right channels, you want to establish absolute perpendicularity of the gap or the center of the head with that of the edge of the tape. Or in a case of a poorly recorded tape, however that tape comes in the door, but ideally perpendicular to the edge. Okay, so another method which after nearly 10 years of doing this I just learned last year is using a dual trace mode on the oscilloscope and just looking at the two waveforms. More commonly and sort of in the jam on a daily basis set up, just watching the VU meters peaking. And the other one that Mike would recommend if you're in the studio with a console, summing the channels to mono, and then, you know, just observing for the peak output. Okay? Yeah, so videos in the PowerPoint, hopefully this works. So, there it goes. So the ideal is a line going from the bottom left to the top right quadrant. This is your in phase, 0 degrees. But I'll show you as you turn the azimuth adjustment screw, tilting the head left and right about the tape. We're going to see that open up all the way to the point of going from the top left to the bottom right, or 180 degrees out of phase. And then with X and Y, it's the amplitude of the left channel and the right channel. Okay, so again, click. No videos. No videos. No videos. Okay. Okay. Not gonna happen. It's less effective without a video. Slightly less effective. Okay. This other thumb drive. Can I pull this? Did I have it there? Here we go. Let's try this. Same folder. Computer's dying. Okay, so clearly we're using different incompatible softwares between computers. So do me a favor and go to our website after this, and I'll post it there for you to look at. So certainly. Okay, so.
Excuse me, is that a PowerPoint produced on Mac?
No, on a Windows machine. Yeah.
Go directly, put it outside of PowerPoint. Media player.
Oh. What do I have to install? What kind of bloatware do I have to install? Okay, so I'm rotating the azimuth screw, and I'm creating an out of phase relationship between the left and right channels. You saw that it went all the way to the, I don't know, let's just call it opposite, top left to the bottom right at the one point. And now we're going to look at the oscilloscope in a dual trace to sort of bring that back together. Okay, again, I can't believe I did not know that I could observe the azimuth adjustment this way. So right now we're recording a 10 kilohertz tone. Again, if this is too heady, I apologize. If it's not heady enough, I apologize as well. But so we're recording 10 kilohertz, we're adjusting the azimuth, and we're watching how the two sine waves are moving, or one about the other, really. But then when we take it, let's say to that 180 point where it was top, left, bottom, right, we'll see that the amplitude even decreases. Okay, don't mind all the hash, but the point being that there's multiple ways to see this relationship. Okay, last one. Most commonly, this is what I do on a daily basis, or I'm in the technician's world, but we're seeing that the output falls and drops as we're adjusting the azimuth screw. Now, if we are recording 1 kilohertz, it might not be so apparent the fall, but our proper azimuth setting is when that 10K tone peaks on both channels. Okay, back to the show. And blue screen of death because I didn't have this prep. Okay, so one more topic, setting the bias. So again, we're all sort of, everybody in the room has a different sort of level when it comes to tape machines, but if a very common question is setting the bias, whether what tape do I have or what machine do I have, the list goes on of things that are going to affect how to set it properly. But I'll give you 2 or 3 additional methods for doing it without needing to know anything. So let's see, parameters that affect bias, everything, period. That's my presentation. So the tape machine that you're using, the speed of the machine, the type of tape that you're using. Most machines have different record heads, and this is a very important thing for determining the amount of bias that's going to be setting the tape for the optimum setting, which is most output, cleanest sound, what everybody's desiring. Okay, so over bias. This is the studio standard. Record a 10K tone, increase the bias current, find the peak like we did the Azimuth, increase it X dB more because the manufacturer, myself, told you to do so. Now I'm telling you that because I took the time to use a distortion analyzer to find that proper point, and it happens to correspond with the recommended overbias value. Straightforward. Now the 1 kilohertz method is a similar method, and it sort of plays on the fact that the peak output of a 1K tone is going to correspond to the lowest point of third harmonic distortion on the tape. So if we're recording a 1K tone and adjusting the bias, let's say I don't even know what model machine I'm working on. I definitely don't know the tape type I have. I pulled it from the closet. Record a 1K tone and adjust the bias for the peak output. You're going to be right at the manufacturer's recommendation, be it the machine or the tape. The next one, again, super common, and I think it's sort of like the old technician's tool where, I like the, use your ear, yeah, we say that a lot in the audio world. But I like my line here of adjust the bias while listening to your favorite sine wave. So I listen to a lot of sine waves in the shop, and, I don't have a particular favorite, but 60 hertz works pretty well. 80 is also pleasant, more pleasant than 1 kilohertz. But again, what are we listening for? We're listening for a clean tone. We don't want any rocks or gravel or hash. Now, you could say there's other problems related to tape recording that are going to show up as rocks and gravel, but you'll hear it for sure when you start adjusting the bias. You're not going to hear poor bias, under bias, or too much over bias while listening to dynamic program. Music is not going to show you. When you're recording pure tones, sine waves, then you're really going to hear if I'm under or if I'm over. So the low frequency is just something that you can tolerate and really experiment with low range, high range. And again, you arrive at the same point as you did any other method. The last method, which I'll close on, is that which is used by the manufacturers, is just using a distortion analyzer to measure the third harmonic content. So again, we're recording a 1K tone, we're tuning the bias back and forth to get our lowest value. Then we go into recording a 10K tone, dial the bias back, and that number is the overbias figure, that which I tell to all of you. So those are two topics that I wish were covered in that ad nauseum fashion when I was getting into this. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm Chad Kassem from Acoustic Sounds, and I want to thank these gentlemen for those nice presentations. And we're just going to play a little. We been started manufacturing tape, and took some video while I was at Sterling Sound, because we did something pretty special where we. I think we called it maybe AXPONA.
Here we go.
Yeah, anyway, this is Ryan Smith at Sterling Sound, and well, you can probably tell what he's doing. We're transferring, can you turn it up any? We're transferring the Pines of Rome, which is a 3-track tape. We're reducing it down to 2 tracks.
It's Pines of Rome and Fountains of Rome. These two are the 2 tracks, and then the original 3-track was in this kind of metal box. And it's actually on the tape machine right here. So this is the original 3-track tape for that recording. Next up we have these.
I guess the speakers ain't.
These are the 3 tracks, the original 3 tracks. The things that we have that we benefit from is we've got a better playback machine in terms of it's quieter machine, and there's can be a case made for tubes and not tubes and that kind of stuff, but this is definitely, it's a more solid machine. The speed stability is better. Here we go.
It's very short. Anyway, it's
A2RB
Ryan.
4703, take number 5.
The 6 Pines of Rome and Fountains of Rome. These two are the 2 tracks, and then the original 3 track was in this kind of metal box, and it's actually on the tape machine right here. So this is the original 3 track tape for that recording. Next up we have this is Scheherazade, Reiner's and
3 channel, right?
These are the 3 tracks, the original 3 tracks. The things that we have that we benefit from is we've got a better playback machine in terms of it's a quieter machine. I mean, this can be a case made for like tubes or not tubes and that kind of stuff, but this is definitely, it's a more solid machine. The speed stability is better, and the electronics are much quieter. So, then you come to the transfer console, which is, these consoles are definitely much more transparent and quieter than anything we would have had. Masters were. So we're basically making new masters, going back to the multis. And so then the tapes that you're going to be selling are basically like dubs straight off the new master.
Anyway, we just in just coming here, I thought, hey, we were fixing to put this video together to show how we transfer these tapes. And in the case of the classical, it's pretty unique because we're able to, the tapes that we're selling are actually one off the master, because since the recording was made to 3 track, when you reduce it to 2 track, that's your actual master. And so we had the 3 track tapes. We were able to make 3 half-inch, 30-inch per second copies of the 3 channel. And so that's the tapes we use to make the copies we're selling, which is really pretty awesome. When they first did these records, like in 58, they made a 3-to-2 reduction to like 1/4 inch, maybe 15 or 30, and they were using the Ampex 350, which is a good machine. It sounds good, but I hear that the speed is not always as accurate as the new Ampex machines or the later Ampex machines, and the heads probably weren't as good either. So actually, if we made you a one-off of the original master, it wouldn't be as good as, the first original master wouldn't be as good as the one we're making now, because we're using the new Ampex with the new heads and half-inch tape and 30-inch per second. So it's pretty awesome that we're able to make, consumers' tapes one off the master of these very famous RCA recordings that were really good. Another thing that was interesting was while we was doing that, if you saw the Ryan pull out the index card, everybody knows that one of the rare RCA albums, the classic, the original, the Pines of Rome, that particular tape, we sell for like $1,000 a piece because it was the 1S stamper. Well, it was too dynamic, so they had to recut the record. And so if you have a 1S, it goes for $1,000 because hardly anybody has one because it was too dynamic for the record players of the time. So, but when we were looking at the original 3-track tape, we pulled out that index card, and it said, at 20 minutes, both fuses blew, when they were, and it was right there, black and white, so it's like, it's kind of neat to see the history and of that record, and so they were having trouble with it. Of because it was just so dynamic. And it shows you, you know, like, again, we're talking about records now. The 1S was pressed at Indianapolis, and the 2S was like pressed in Rockaway, New York. The 3S was in Hollywood, and the 4S was Canada. I might have the two middle ones mixed up, but anyway, you could see people were like, you know, always, well, the 1S is the best. Nobody was really sure exactly what the 1S, 2S, 3S meant. Anyway, with the index card, you're going to see exactly what happened. And when first time they ever recut it and remastered it. And anyway, so that's the story of the Pines of Rome. So the story of the tape is, you know, we've been doing records and for a long time, and you know, just like with the HiRez download, you know, basically it's the customers come to you, hey man, we want HiRez download, you know, and then you hear it about 1,000 times, and you're like, and then you go to a few of these seminars where I sat out there and heard about the HiRez download, and it's like, you know what, you know, we're really into analog and vinyl, but hey, if we can do the best quality digital we can and do these HiRez download, and that's what the customer wants, and that's what we'll do. We'll try to do the best we can. And then the next thing is tape. You know, everybody, hey man, when are you going to do tape? It's like, yeah, you know, nobody understands just how hard it is, how expensive it is, how long it takes, the licensing, just the making of the box, you know. I mean, just the box they come in was like $30,000 with the boxes we had to buy. And then you have to make them one by one. And so, you know, I knew mostly all about how hard it was going to be. So when people just keep asking, you know, it just kind of irritates you, you know, because it's like they want what they want, but they don't really know how hard it is, and they think it's pretty easy. Or I mean, so we did it, and it was just as hard as we thought, if not harder. And, you know, we had to buy 5 ATR machines and rebuild them all from, or have a ATR rebuild them all, or pay to have them rebuilt, meaning I didn't rebuild them. So, you know, now we got the 5 machines, and we're ready to roll, you know. So we've released 6 titles so far, and people have spoken. They've stood up to the plate and ordered good enough to where it's happening. And it's, I mean, you just walk around the show, and it just reminds you when the days the CD kind of got real popular, you wouldn't see that many turntables, and then as those days pass, you just see more and more and more turntables, to where now you don't see a CD player. Which is a beautiful sight. But so now you're walking around, there's lots of tape machines, you know. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I was on the 4th floor, and there was like 3 rooms in a row that had really nice machines. So, you know, and it all has to come together, you know. Like, they can build all the best tape machines in the world, but if you ain't got tape to play, you know, what good is it? Or you could have all the tape in the world, and if you don't have the machines to play, you know, what good is that? So it takes a bunch of different people to come together at the same time to make it happen. And people like Miles, you know, they need people to kind of promote and to ask people, hey, we'd really love to see you do this, you know. And so it's a lot of prodding and convincing and talking and to a lot of people, you know. And a lot of people, you know, don't do it until it's way now all they see is dollar signs. Now it's like very obvious there's money there. Now it's kind of, I mean, I shouldn't laugh too hard, but it's funny to see some of the people that, you know, were not even thinking about doing it, like all of a sudden they're all about it, you know. But same thing happened with records, you know, like the major labels, they could have cared, you know, about vinyl records, and now they're just all about it. You know, oh, we've vinyl the whole time. I said, yeah, you're the first son of a guns I saw running, you know, and oh, we love. I said, no, you love cash, you know. So, you know, that's what's happening with tape. I mean, it takes a lot of people like Miles and that to really drive it and to convince people and to try to talk everybody into it. And it's nice when everybody, you know, the tape guys make the, you know, they have to have somebody making tape, which is only 2 companies doing it. Company Dan works for is one of them. And then you got that, you need tape machines, you know, and then you need the music. So it's all coming together. It's really awesome. I mean, this show, I've never seen more tape machines. So anyway, we're real happy about that. You know, again, we were kind of convinced that we ought to do this, and I really appreciate the support and that everybody that is investing in it, keeping it going. And I'm sure you've seen the tape machines. Just go out and listen to it and decide. It costs a lot more, and it's a little bit more of trouble. It's not as convenient, but I think most people at these shows are about the ultimate sound, and I mean I've got almost everything that I own invested in vinyl. So you know, but I have to admit, you know, if you're going for the ultimate, it's going to be tape. So, thanks.
Thanks, Chad. I just wanted to add, you know, the one thing when Chad got into and announced he was going to get into tape was that one thing that's kind of lacking in the software was rock music. You know, the jazz, they could get, you know, rights to doing the classical, but you know, let's face it, you know, 60% of the market listens to rock, and if you're going to eventually drive the reel-to-reel market, we got to get rock and roll. You know, there's no one out there right now who has more access to every label than Chad. So I think, you know, that's the huge thing that Chad brought, besides just his own credibility. So, you know, and also in terms of the tape machines, there's actually one totally new machine that was debuted at a German show, I think in February, called Baldinger. And the fellow who's doing the electronics is the designer for Gamut Electronics upstairs. And if you want to actually hear the electronics, he's got him set up in a Studer B62. There's supposed to be a new tape deck from Horch House, but that one's kind of been sort of up in the air. But also, I was also told, you know, that there will be another machine out there at the Munich show that's from an older company that used to make tape decks that I don't want to say right now, but it's pretty exciting. It's an old, you know, it's someone's name who you'll remember made tape machines back in the heyday. So, you know, it's only a matter of time to, you know, first it took, you know, people to kind of take tape seriously, then, you know, take the software seriously. And now it's like, hey, maybe we should go back, you know, and we could make even better machines. And as I said, you go around, like in Chris's room, he's paired with Doshi. In Jeff Joseph's room, he's got a Techniques paired with a Doshi. You got Studer decks around. You got, you know, there's an Ampex deck around. So, I mean, you know, you could see all these machines and all the different options. So, again, I don't want to take any more time, but I'd like to open it up. I'm sure there's a few questions out there. So, the gentleman in the blue hat? Brian.
See you. Yeah, your sampler tape says IEC, and the lines are all on the NAB.
I think they're IEC.
Equalization on your samplers here.
You asked me a question. What's the question?
The question is then, are your lines of Rome also IEC or are they NAB?
Well, I think the original might have been in NAB, but I think that, you know, what Gus did was IEC.
Okay,
But
gentlemen.
you know Gus, right? You can corner him and ask him or blame him.
The new formula of the tape, are they 456 compatible
Yeah, so the products that we make, I don't know, it's on or I'm yelling, either way. Yeah, our tape is, I tell people to use a +6 operating level similar to the 456 tapes that they're used to using. I'm trying to think what else to say. The offerings from Recording the Masters, they offer a +6, their 911 tape, and then a +9 tape, the 900 formula. That's similar to the Quantity GP9 or the Ampex 499. The reference tapes. The MRL is still in operation is in San Jose, so they're still doing 1/4 inch to 2 inch, and they're still the standard.
Yep.
Any other? Gentlemen.
My question's going to sound a little derogatory, but it's not intended that way.
I can take it.
It's just,
Which is love friends.
back in 1980, I bought my first computer, and many years later, I pulled out the floppy disks. 84, I bought my first CAD system that had floppy disks too. But again, went to Google Hill, they were archiving many years afterwards, and they couldn't do it. Couldn't read the data. So that read has deteriorated. I'm wondering, how do you know what you're really dealing with 50-year-old?
Well, the tapes that we were played were from 1958, and they sounded awesome.
I know, don't you kind of lose a point of reference that doesn't exist anymore?
No, typically on professional tapes, like Chad was transferring, they print calibration tones prior to the music. So then you can recalibrate today's tape machine to play back that tape as it was recorded. They'll print 1 kilohertz tone, 10 kilohertz, and 100 hertz, and then you match that playback and azimuth, as Dan described, to that tape. So you're playing back what they recorded.
Going over things like noise
Mm-mm.
and stuff.
Well, I think there's another factor that people kind of lose also. Let me just say this into the mic. But the one thing is, if you notice all the new heads that they're using, they're Greg Wharton's flux magnetic heads. And one thing in the old days that the record heads were pretty decent, and I'm sure Dan and Chris can comment more. But what was the weakness in the old days was the playback heads and the gap width, and the newer heads are built much better. So in reality, you might be getting actually more information off the tape than you even knew was on the tape with the new tape heads, because there's smaller width gap and some other things. And I'm sure these guys can talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is a lot of people that are archiving things, they'd rather archive it to analog than digital, because it's going to last longer, and it's there, it's physical, and you can see it. I mean, a lot of people, in fact, they cut into metal parts, cut lacquers and things, so.
Yeah. I'm not saying what happened to you didn't happen, but it doesn't operate the same with analog tape and playback.
I mean, they've had problems like sticky tape, stick together, or, it may, if you rewind it too fast, or, nothing's perfect, but if I was going to store something that was really valuable to me or important to me, I would rather it on tape than a CD,
Mm-hmm.
or hard drive or anything digital. So,
Another question?
Yeah.
Standard storage is still tailed out.
Yes.
Correct. Yep.
Have you ever done it with a heat? I know a lot of, it's always a realistic thing to do. Hey, I have some old maps, but I need to go 60
Yeah, I do it every other day. Yeah. Yeah. I use a Stack Master 2000 food dehydrator. Because, yes. Yep. My studio combined with my tape machine restoration company as every professional format machine restored, so that garners us a lot of archive work.
You ever notice the guitar amplifiers? time check power source, that's needs. The other thing, that's an old CIA system. I've been wondering, how that affects the time.
Yeah, guitar amplifiers get their sound from inferior power supplies. It's called SAG. And tape machines have robust power supplies, so I don't see that happening. No. No.
I think there was another gentleman over here.
Well, when he was talking, that's one thing I didn't mention is how tough the record labels can be. And one in particular, no. It ain't easy. But nothing's easy, and nothing worth doing is easy, and all those sayings you've heard. But the pop is going to be the hardest. Oh, you can have our classical, you can have this jazz, but you want this, So we actually got. Well, I don't want to go too far into this, but we signed a contract with a major label on a major band, and we just hadn't got around to doing the transfer. And I just heard that they want to change their mind on it. So it ain't easy, but basically, look. Sony wants to see Uni do it. If Uni does it, or vice versa, or Sony does it, then oh yeah, we'll do it. But it's like you could have begged them for 20 years before, offered them all the money in the world. But once they see that it's happening and others are doing it, and then they actually see a finished product, it gets a whole lot easier. But I mean, you're asking like to go to them and say you want to make some music on a $450 reel-to-reel tape, they just can't even believe it. And then they're like, well, we don't want people getting that close to our masters. I'm like, listen, you're putting high-res downloads that somebody in Australia can buy a 192 file that's straight off the master, not leave his living room, download it in his underwears at 3 in the morning in Australia. You think the bootlegger is going to pay $450 for a master tape, analog tape, get an Ampex or an MCI tape machine to transfer it to make a bootleg? You think a bootlegger cares that much? And if they do, it's still going to be, a high-res download at 192. That's pretty damn good, And so some people are still paranoid about letting their masters out. And, anyway, I
think we got time for one more question.
That guy's been.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a panel after us, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you heard anything about prosumer reels coming out? Any hope in the future that we're going to see a machine that the average consumer can afford?
Well, I think what's your machine bill for?
About $8,000.
I mean, I think the board.
But that's a pro machine for $8,000. There's a lot of prosumers for $20 if that's what you want. You can get a pro for $8.
Yeah, I think the board house was announced to be around 5,000. I still love it if they can get into that, but I mean, the alternative, if you have someone around you that's pretty savvy, tech savvy, is you can start with an Atari or a Techniques deck, and then you can add some outboard electronics, and you can go from there. Just have someone to wire the heads out, so you can use like the fellow vacuum. Charlie King makes a tape stage, Bottlehead makes a tape stage. I mean, I think right now there's like 6.
You got choices.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some new ones. He just mentioned. That guy keeps wanting to ask.
Yes.
The last question, the guy in the back.
A couple comments and a question. First of all, you were talking about tape sticking. 3M back in the 70s made tapes which was very hygroscopic. And it would stick, it'd actually stick on the machine or sometimes snap on big Studer Ampex. That was a major problem. And you couldn't get around it. But that was what you were talking about. The other problem with tape too is print through and partial erasure. over time. And that counts. Nobody's talking about that. But my question to you guys is, I was wondering if any of you have ever used the last tape bit preservative and the last tape treatment and how it worked and how it sounded. If you
Not familiar.
That's a
No.
question that's come up on a couple of bulletin boards, and I think it's been met with the same response. No one has tried it.
No.
You try, let us know, all right?
Yeah. Well, but to speak to print through, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but that was a common phenomena before our high-end backings now and high output tapes. I mean, I don't experience print through in my recording studio.
Store tails out.
Store tails out, yeah. And self-erasure, you know, I mean, you know.
Okay,
Oh, record brighter.
We're getting the high sign from
All right, we got it.
Thank the
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
our panel for a really great job.